Welcome back to the Fire Break. I'm Steve Wolf. As you know, the Fire Break is sponsored by Team Wildfire, trying to decrease the deadliness of wildfires and reduce property damage from them. I have got with me today Philip Taylor. He's the operations manager at Pelican Wildfire and a former hotshot himself. So he's taken his experience from fighting fires for the government, and now he's using it to work privately and make communities safer. Philip, welcome to the Fire Break. How are you today?
Awesome. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Tell me what you're working on these days.
It's hard to really dive into it without giving a little background on the suppression side of things. So started initially volunteering in Prince William County, right outside of DC, looking to go that structured track until one of my lead instructors said, have you ever checked out this wildland thing? And like, you see it on the news and whatnot, but it's amazing, East Coast, West Coast, how disconnected you can be. I have a lot of family in California and Oregon, Washington. So that piece was, connected with, but really putting those two pieces together was this instructor of mine. And he connected me with Virginia Department of Forestry, call when needed crew. So pretty much a 10-man IA that would respond around Virginia and Pennsylvania, Maryland, North Carolina, and then help homeowners with prescribed burns. So that was really my first introduction to putting fire on the ground for resource benefit. A lot of grass fields, alfalfa, things like that. Burn for the crop benefits, and then got a few Western tours in Oregon, Washington, and Idaho, and then I kind of threw the whole structure thing behind me. No more running EMS calls, and packed up my Jeep and drove out west, and got onto a heli-attack unit out of Eastern Oregon. So we had a chunk of the Malheur. I had the bird refuge that the Bundys took over. Actually, it was the year after, like, the whole thing was going on. The FBI left, everything had been settled, and that's when I started. So the saw shop was actually used as somewhat of like a sniper nest, and they had cut a huge hole in the side of the saw shop, or it was more like a shack, but where we did all the maintenance on the saws and kept our spare parts. So a little interesting kind of throw into the dynamic nature of more rural spots and the back and forth with government entities and private entities and use of fire and whatnot. But it was a super active base from a suppression standpoint. The last year I was there, I flew 32 missions myself, from search and rescue to doing short haul missions, like moving things like fence into areas where we were trying to protect the bighorn sheep population. So if the domesticated sheep and the bighorn sheep touch noses, they spread this kind of flu that will wipe out the bighorn sheep population. So a little touch of wildlife in there too, and then went from there to California, where I was an apprentice on an engine on the Mendocino. Apprenticeship program is geared towards leadership in the Forest Service as far as suppression. So you go to 2 different academies, each a month long, down in Sacramento at McClellan Air Force Base, and you get to take a ton of different classes, interact with a ton of different entities from around the nation in the Forest Service and Park Service, and then you spend a season on some kind of crew that you haven't had experience with prior. I went to Reading Hotshots. Reading Hotshots is called a development crew or a training crew, but it takes all permanent employees with the Forest Service and other entities, BLM, BIA, and throws them together. So there's a staff of 5 overhead that are always there, and then 15 other hotshots or soon to be hotshots that are thrown in the mix, and you have to go through a 2-month training program, or get to go through, I should say. And you end it with a staff ride of the South Canyon fire back in '94, which prior to Granite Mountain was the highest casualty fire as far as firefighter loss of firefighter life prior to Granite Mountain. And it's a really eye-opening, sobering experience somewhat, because you walk it with the survivors. Kip, I'm totally blanking on his last name, but is kind of the main driver of it. He has a great set of YouTube videos out there, and is on the Smoky Generation a video blog. But you get one-on-one time with them, and it was quite an amazing experience. That year prior to going out there, our buggy was hit head on by a driver that fell asleep behind the wheel. Coming back from a training assignment, like we were just trying to figure out, saw order and tool order. So like where everyone kind of falls in that pecking order. And yeah, it's a pretty intense experience being in the back of a buggy. I broke a few bones and whatnot, but was back to work 7 weeks later, and finished out the season with the Reading Hotshot crew. And we went to Alaska twice. We're on the Kenai Peninsula for a 21-day assignment. One of the most incredible assignments of my life. We were literally like, you could see the glaciers coming down from the mountains along the Sound. Wake up every morning, just that view. The slog to work, as it will, was a little rougher, because you had to walk through a good 45 minutes to an hour of just marsh, and the gnats are eating you alive, and your feet are a little cold, and then you get to this absolutely amazing viewscape. And it was a dozer line that we had to hike directly up to, and then we were holding the ridge line. A lot of peat moss, whatnot, and you're more or less just chunking it down to the point where it's 1.5 feet deep of just peat moss, and you do it in 1 foot to 2 feet wide, and just peel it back like it were AstroTurf. And then you would watch the fire bosses come in, so the single engine air tanker scoopers come in pairs and hit the line with water repeatedly. And as hotshots, we would come back behind and make sure the line was secure. There were times in there where it was just, you hang back for an hour and a half and watch the air show. So I got a real good up close and personal viewpoint of what the capabilities of the smaller aircraft are, and retardant and water applications. Moving on from there, I finished my career operationally with Kings Peak, formerly called Fire Use Modules, now called Wildfire Modules. The Fire Use tag had a bit of pushback, I guess, but the idea is utilize fire for resource benefit and focus in on that science piece of it. So doing fuel samples, field loading. So there's a way of doing field loading called photo loading, relatively new, as in last 15 years, but it's a very accurate, or more accurate, I would say, picture of the entirety of the landscape, versus the old method, which was Brown's transect. And you literally took a tape measure out in multiple different directions from a single point, and everything that tape measure fell on, that's what you would mark. So like it's literally just like this scalpel thin cut of what the fields on the ground were. Photo loading kind of brings out the whole of it, but it does rely on user data. So the more people that are using it, And there's a app that's being developed by the Allen Institute, I believe, and the Forest Service in conjunction, where they're trying to train an AI to detect based on all this user data that's been inputted. So you take a picture and it will spit you out. This is what your 100-hour fuels are. This is what your 1-hour fuels are in tons per acre. So you can plug that into modeling software, and that's the kind of thing that the WFM does, and then also specializes in remote fires, so completely self-sufficient for 10 days. So literally we were dropped off in the salmon chalice forest on the middle fork of the salmon, right outside of this guardhouse. We're flown in on a Twin Otter plane. And then it was, see you later. We'll be back in 10 days to resupply you. So all those little pieces of the puzzle, although, can seem meandering, really came to what I'm trying to do with Pelican. So utilize those pieces, especially in the structured defense and the understanding of how different resources are utilized, and create, CWPPs, Community Wildfire Preparedness Plans. Sorry to throw acronym at you. I saw that face. But it's just a plan from, these are the points where we're weak. These are the points we need to continue to work on. Long-term, short-term goals, evacuation routes, things of that nature. So really, my focus is any way that I can help the area where I now live protect itself from the clear and evident threat that we're surrounded by.
And you're in Salt Lake City area,
Park
right?
City.
Park City. Okay.
Yeah.
Beautiful area.
Amazing area. Amazing area. I lucked out. Park City was where we would R&R and take our days off. Where I was stationed was Hanna, Utah, which is 2 hours away from the closest true grocery store. There's a pass that in the beginning of the season is not open, so you're going a long way around to any kind of city of a little bit more population than a few hundred, and like an amazing, beautiful place. But I met my wife here, and she's 32-year local of Park City, and definitely made that decision. Like maybe those long-term assignments where I'm back in the bush and not in cell reception, like maybe it's time for those to be over. But one of the biggest things about that was that kind of truly brought it into perspective was I was on a fire on the Salmon Chalice, and came out and my phone all of a sudden just starts blowing up. 100-something text messages, 7 different voicemails from my wife, and I'm like, what is happening? Immediately call her. She's like, everything's good now, but there was a fire where we were all evacuated, her mom, grandma, brother-in-law's family, all in the same neighborhood, and they're now staying at our apartment, 900 square feet, with a 1.5-year-old nephew of ours and dog. So like I was like, oh, maybe it wasn't too bad that I missed that portion of it, but definitely need to be around and looking to set up roots here.
So you're saying that the remote firefighter life is maybe not for everyone, especially not if you're married and needed in your family on a daily basis. And
it's a tough life. It's a tough life, out of the people.
But try to sell it a little bit. I mean, we're losing numbers in wildland firefighters. So telling all the things that are so bad about it, like that's not going to help the problem here.
That is true.
So who is it for? Like who would love it?
I mean, there are a ton of people that would love it, and for the portion of my life that I did fight fire, which was almost a decade in federal operation uh, uh, resources, modules, it was the most incredible journey of my life. Like, from the places that I got to see during the season, you work an 18 and 8 schedule, or every position that I did, which means you're 18 pay periods on, eight pay periods off. So 2-week pay periods, 36 weeks on, and then that essentially 4 months that you had off. I would grab my backpack and passport and go to 2 different countries every year. So a lot of availability. So Chile, Argentina, Andes. Spent some time in Nepal and the Himalayas. All over Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Cambodia, Myanmar. Just absolute incredible, full-on life-changing experience. And that's very much in the culture of wildland firefighting. And I miss it every single day. But it was time for me to turn the page of my life and go on to the next chapter. But I'm still heavily involved in keep contact with a lot of very close people. Wouldn't say heavily involved, but in just talking to engine captain that I had, who was a huge part of my life and just an amazing support structure overall. There's a local guy that took over the assistant position, who was my partner here in Utah. And we're we get together and we talk about the people that we train to fill our shoes, and like how he's moving up and taking on that leadership role. And it's just an amazing community. So many people that I could call up, and be like, hey, you know what? I'm on the corner of walk and don't walk. I need your help. And I'm on my way. Just the tight knit, camaraderie based. Get a lot of vets, a lot of veterans coming directly from active duty and go directly into the fire service world and the feds. And there's direct hiring authority, which means that a hiring manager sees a vet application, doesn't have to go through the extensive bureaucracy side of things, because they earn their right, and get a lot of good opportunity and a lot of good leadership knowledge from those guys, especially in the moments of high intensity, and anybody who really enjoys the outdoors and is okay with sleeping on the ground, 6 months out of the year, which isn't for everybody, but there's a lot of people out there that kind of fit that mold. One of my idols kind of coming up and in developing the business was Yvon Chouinard, the founder of Patagonia. He wrote an amazing book, Let My People Go Surfing. And it's just about making an impact in the ways that you can. One of my favorite quotes, often mistakenly attributed to Theodore Roosevelt, but is written about in his autobiography. He's like Bill. I'm slipping the name of who actually said the quote, but do what you can where you're at with what you got. And Teddy Roosevelt calls it a homely philosophy that sums up doing one's duty. He's very much a hardened, character and somewhat larger than life. And there's the famous picture of him that was kind of photoshopped for the day, of him riding the moose across the river, which didn't actually happen, but you wouldn't put him past the man. It really kind of sums up that philosophy of those who end up in the wildland world. And it's a calling, I guess, to some degree. And once you're in for life. There's just, like I said, amazing community and the people who are involved in the entirety of the world, and like even people that aren't in day-to-day operations but support from whatever they can, like the Wildland Firefighters Foundation. I don't know if you're too familiar with that organization, but absolutely incredible people, really doing a lot to take care of the wildland firefighting workforce. And they're sponsored by Coors, which is kind of funny, but Coors had helped them build a brand new facility in Boise that is incredible beyond belief. There's a full-scale replica of a lookout tower with the dial that's about 3 or so feet in diameter, where you're pointing towards whatever fire you're spotting to get an azimuth, the direction, cardinal direction, and then line it up with another lookout so you get that cross point and find the fire. So the true old school way of looking at things before a satellite is jumping in there.
Yeah, the new fire tower is 250 miles up, right?
Right, yeah. Yeah, it's pretty cool though. Like there are a number of them still in operations. The former Reading Hotshot superintendent, so lead man in charge, staffs, as far as I know, still staffs a lookout tower in the Modoc Forest up near the lava beds, far northern California. And there's actually an assignment that we were on where we were staged for incoming lightning, and we were hanging out in the lookout tower, saw the strikes come down. We helped point out, looking, glassing, so using binoculars, I see a smoke pop up, help shoot the azimuth. He calls it in, we get assigned to it, and we were the last ones to walk off, which is kind of cool, like little, full intel.
Start to finish, yeah.
Yeah, definitely think there's a lot in the AI world and the satellite world, though, that will, put those guys somewhat out of business, but it's all part of the change, right?
Yeah, I'm wondering, do you see that it's going to put them out of business, or that it's going to retrain them on a new technology?
So I think that facet of people, they tend to be experienced, very, very experienced, but in the older side of the workforce. And I think they'll be redirected towards a more intel-based. So, like, local knowledge is hugely important anytime you're coming in as a new resource on a fire, especially the federal world. I was sent from everywhere from Alaska, bush, all the way down to the border of Mexico, and pretty much everywhere in between. And so you'll walk into a place in New Mexico, never been there before, never seen the forest, never seen the ground. You go immediately to that person who knows the forest, knows the ins and outs, knows this road is, solid, this road gets washed out, and you're really, a lot of ways relying on that intel, but they just won't be necessarily stacked up in a lookout tower. There's definitely a upcoming generation, I would say, that would fit a lot of those roles in that tech savvy GIS kind of realm. It's shifting, but it is the nature of the beast. Despite that age old adage, hundreds of years of tradition unimpeded by progress. Forest Service motto, or not Forest, Fire Service.
Yeah. Right.
Joke about we can be stuck in our ways. Took a long time for the structure side to get rid of the old school leather helmets and refusing to wear SCBAs growing into to buildings, and you're talking about 60s kind of era or previous, but it's part of it, right?
Yeah, I think there's probably there may be like an interim level we talk about like old guard, I'm not going to use that Pulaski with a fiberglass handle. What's wrong with the wooden one? Right. Right. So like deeply entrenched in, uh, medieval hardware. And then you have other people looking on the AI side of the spectrum, right? How can we use AI to diagnose fires and create suppression algorithms, et cetera? But I think what we need in the middle would be a different AI, acquired intelligence. And that's where we take the intelligence of and the wisdom of the people who've been there, done that, and we use that to train actual artificial intelligence.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the $1 million idea right there.
Well, I'm hoping it's actually the multi-billion-dollar idea,
well,
but
yeah.
somewhere in that range, because
right, yeah.
yes,
There's so many different avenues, and what's so amazing about the current conversation is there's people like yourself, and the come to fruition moment, that light bulb moment that you were describing when you were interviewed on Amazing People little podcast or podcast episode. Correct me if I'm getting that wrong, but you were playing with a leaf blower, not playing with, but moving a pile of burning leaves with a leaf blower, and you're looking at it and thinking like, I wonder, how I can use wind and the things that are available, the tools that I've been using for a long period of time, and repurpose and redirect and see if this works. The more that there's that conversation out there coming from different perspectives and different backgrounds and opening up that dialogue, the more there's going to be an effective approach using that old guard information and intel. Like, there's no point in which we should throw away, like, that was all done in the past. Like you said, kind of the caveman-esque, well, not caveman, but rudimentary kind of way of thinking. I think it's highly valued to use that going forward. Paul Gleason, I don't know if you're too familiar with him, but
sure. Situational awareness.
What's that?
The situational awareness.
Yeah, the 10 and 18, 10 standard firefighting orders and 18 watch out situations. And he coined the phrase student of fire. And the Paul Gleason Award in leadership is probably the highest honor you can get in the wildland world. It's peer voted, and it's really being an all-encompassing student of fire, looking at what came before, learning from, and then growing with best practices and new technology.
So
there's going to be a point in firefighting where Pulaski's not, needed in some form or fashion, but yeah.
Yeah, it's not an or situation; it's an and situation, right?
Exactly.
That fire presents enough opportunities that there's some place for every technology.
Exactly.
Whether it's a hose, an axe, a pitchfork, an airplane, a satellite, like these things all have a place, because while technology is evolving, fire really isn't, right? We're getting more of it, but it's still, fuel, oxygen, heat, and chemical reaction. Like, the physics of it aren't going away. There's no modernization of the process of how things burn. We're just burning more stuff and a bigger variety of stuff over a bigger area and for longer.
And
but
we're moving into inhabitating the areas, or habitating the areas that it has always lived.
Yeah, we're moving into the wildland urban in your face, right?
Right. Yeah. One of the kind of metrics that I find kind of cool in Utah is Pondo. I don't know if you're familiar
Pondo?
with yeah, the aspen stand.
No.
It's Latin for I spread. It's the largest.
Wait, Latin for what?
For I spread. So it's an aspen clone in the Fish Lake National Forest, and it's the largest tree of its species by land mass and by volume. Little fun facts. It's approximated to weigh 13.2 million pounds, and its age is roughly 9,000 plus years old, coming from a single seed 9,000 years ago.
Wow.
So somewhere between 9,000 and the last ice age is the closest they can get that number. And there's a highway that you drive right alongside it, and I'm sure a lot of people drive through it without even realizing. But it stood through, at least 9,000 years of changing climate and fire, and so when you compare that to our lifespan, just in it of itself, we're kind of just a blip on that radar, and it's like you said, not a or, it's an and, going back to even like the native population use of fire and living with fire, and going forward using all of the knowledge that we had or have.
Yeah. So Philip, given that we're most people feel like we're in an unprecedented era of vulnerability to fire, of human loss of life, animal loss of life, loss of vegetation, and loss of the built environment. Right. A lot of people feel like they cannot recall having seen a worse period or are aware of one in the recent past. So, what do you think are the areas that hold the most promise right now for mitigating this situation?
Reintroducing fire into the landscape is I think one of the biggest keys, and learning to adapt and maybe make certain compromises, or listen to all stakeholders. So I mentioned Park City is where I'm at. It's a incredibly heavily geared economy towards tourism. The best time to pile burn is during the winter. That's also the best time to ski, since the ski resorts are the lifeblood of this town, and we're bidding for the 2034 Olympics, I believe.
Wow, that's thinking ahead.
What's that?
That's thinking ahead.
Well, if the ski resorts aren't there because they burned up, it's a pretty hard hit to our overall economy. But also, like, thinking in the current, which is, if we smoke out the entire valley, nobody wants to ski in smoke, which I understand. I choke smoke for 12 years in private and public, and it doesn't really suit. Like, it kind of stinks. Breathe in smoke, and I understand that, but at the same time, there's something that needs to be done. And I do remember there's one gruff morning where I was burning with a private entity, Alpine Forestry, who's done a lot to reintroduce fire into this landscape, especially in the aspen stands. Have an amazing kind of golden standard, I'd like to think, of an aspen regeneration project that they utilized, cutting, thinning, piling, burning, reseeding, and dealing with the noxious weeds to really, really balance out that little chunk of aspen stand over a 3-year process. But in the course of doing that, it was the second year that we were burning, and it was 6:30 in the morning, just finished briefing, and a homeowner comes out. You're smoking us out again. And out of my mouth was, well, a little smoke now or a burn down house later, take your pick. Which was a gruff answer, and probably not the most tailored of response. However,
but not inaccurate.
No. And yeah, so where is that balance? And so the entities, like utilizing biochar, which is something that I'm discussing with another company, the use of in the Park City area, that came up with a very simplistic design, but it works. that
So then you're talking about the design for making biochar out of wood, but what is the actual use and benefit of biochar? Like,
So
why do
there's
people want to make it?
a lot of different uses and sorry about that. Uses and benefits. So aiding in photosynthesis, soil water retention, the filtering out of negative or harmful soil deposits like heavy metals. Uh, so it's overall an amazing thing and a positive way of reintroducing carbon into some of these environments, especially things like the aspen stands where there's the conifer encroachment. So you have subalpine fir that are not um, fire tolerant, but are very shade tolerant, which then on the aspen side are the opposite. Aspen, from a fire mitigation standpoint, do not burn super intensely. I've seen a head fire hit a healthy aspen stand and drop to a ground fire, and easily or more easily, lined and taken care of, versus a conifer, which I would say is like a mix of a Roman candle and a jet engine. Uh, it's an amazing sight to see multiple conifers torch up and make a canopy run, so that the tops of the trees lighting and just looking like a freight train. And so that what the biochar kind of does is aids in the aspen health without putting large stress with fire on residents and burning around homes directly in any kind of broadcast way. So you can do it in controlled chunks, and the different designs of the kiln really capture both the smoke and the methane that's being released. It's drawing air from the sides of the kiln and creating kind of a machine washing effect with the air, and holding all of the airflow in place long enough for that smoke to hit pyrolysis, that point in which it fully consumes. So there's a lot of different avenues and benefits to that. From a larger scale, you have a HOA, say, that creates a biochar facility on within the community, and that's your green waste disposal site. You bring all of your yard clippings, all that stuff. They burn it. They tabulate all of the carbon they're capturing, and they can be eligible for carbon credits.
Wow.
So from an economic standpoint, like that's a possibility, but it is not a widely used avenue yet. Still working out the cost mechanics of it. So
you can get credit. You can get credit for carbon that the trees captured, not rather than giving the credit to the trees.
Right.
And what you're doing, so a tree is about 50% carbon by weight, and so the process of creating biochar is using pyrolysis or super efficient flame to remove everything but the carbon.
Right.
So right, so just strip away everything from the tree that's not carbon, and what you're left with is carbon. And then what do you do with that? You put it in the soil, you broadcast spray it. How is it applied?
So like there's a few different avenues, and it depends on what you're burning. So not every species is going to create the same chemical makeup, right?
Right.
And so you look at a lot of different these companies out there that are producing biochar for sale, is directed towards a certain kind of landscape vegetation makeup, and it's often sold with some kind of additive as far as like compost, a organic material, because once you put initial biochar down, it's negatively charged, so it's sucking in everything. And that first year, 2 years, you're going to see somewhat of a decrease in the vegetation health overall if you don't add in some kind of compost or fertilizer to balance out that charge. If the vegetation is healthy enough, strong enough to survive that transition period, you definitely go directly onto the soil. But as far as I understand it, it is something that you do kind of want to mix with another organic component. So looking at what your soil pH levels are, your potash, all those soil components, getting some kind of analytics on that, and then taking that data and steering it towards what you need to put back onto the soil that way, if that makes sense.
I see. Yeah, it does. So the process of a commercial biochar manufacturing facility, you're basically burning wood, you're doing it cleanly, so you're not releasing a lot of smoke. What do you do to capture and use that heat or all that energy that comes from the burn?
So there's a really interesting project going on in the Park City area, a little bit west of Park City, by about 20 minutes, and Spoil the Soil Min-Batch Company, and they're taking green waste. They're charging way less than the municipal green waste facility, and they're utilizing all of the material that they take in for firewood, compost, mulch, and biochar, and the offput that is generated from the burning of the biochar, they're putting back into use of an electric to be a 100% self-sufficient facility.
That's amazing.
They just popped up recently.
I used to live in Austin, Texas, where juniper is the predominant scrub that's taken over the land, which is very, very, junipers and cedars, which are very, very high in oils, and they burn incredibly. I've watched them just, literally explode. And next door to me, a facility opened to process it, and the supply is endless and free. Like every landscaper out there is just like filling trucks and trucks of this stuff up and looking for places to drop it.
Right.
So if you can build and the facility, they mulched it, which was kind of silly, because then when you put that mulch back down, you're just creating more places for embers to land, and the mulch is as flammable as the trees. So if you turn that into biochar, however, though, what happens to the saps in there? What happens to the oils? Is there a way to first capture the oils out of them, press them or something, and then burn what's left? Because there's value in the cedar oil itself.
I am not familiar with that particular kind of process. Really capturing the sap, and that's honestly not something that I've ever really thought about.
If you go online and you look up, cedar oil, you'll pay, $40 for a little 3-ounce bottle of it. It's got tremendous value, and people use it to reinvigorate the cedar qualities of their cedar closets to keep moths and other pests away. So I would imagine that with the price of cedar oil being so high, it's almost like putting a bounty on cedar trees, right? Where the right facility could capture the oil, sell that, and then turn the rest into biochar and sell that.
That is an incredibly interesting avenue, something that I'm now going to chase down a little bit. Just
okay.
Out of that curiosity. I mean, that's one of the things that I think is huge in pushing this conversation forward, is how can we make it useful and self-sustaining.
Yeah, not just useful, but profitable, right? Because ultimately people are going to do what's profitable, and they're going to do more of what's profitable than what's right.
Yeah. Like you're right there.
Dollars drive it, right?
Keep my message a little bit more on the up and up for my own mental health sometimes. But you are absolutely 100% right there. Without putting those dollars and cents behind it, it's not something that is going to capture on, in the large scale, and looking for those opportunities to make it profitable, make it something that sells itself. in and of,
Yeah, right.
People are hesitant to change, and they really have to see that um, you know how it affects them directly in the
Yeah,
day to
well,
day.
we shall see. Well, Philip, it's been absolute pleasure speaking with you, and I know there's a lot more you could get into that we'll just reconvene on a second episode.
That would be
But
amazing. That would be
thanks.
amazing. Yeah, there's nothing like a firefighter in the stories.
Right. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's truly a pleasure.
Absolutely. This was the very experienced and informed and industrious Philip Taylor from Pelican Wildfire. If you want to get in touch, there's a link right here underneath the video. Thanks so much for joining us on The Fire Break. The Fire Break is sponsored by Team Wildfire, trying to make fires less deadly and less impactful on our stuff, because that's what people care about. Talk to you soon. See you on the next one. Be well.